I've made several videos about the terrible job market in China, but some foreign friends don't seem to believe it. So let me tell you an even darker story. What if I told you some big companies don't just lay people off, they actually trade employees with each other just to avoid paying compensation? Yeah. That's not a conspiracy theory. This came from an insider. Don't assume that when companies lay off lower-level employees, they don't put much thought into it. In reality, the lower you are, the more efficient and calculated the system becomes. I have a friend, we'll call him Xiaowei. He worked in HR at a major company. And when I say HR, I don't mean hiring or onboarding. His real job was optimizing labor costs. In simple terms, figuring out how to reduce what the company spends on people. He recently got laid off himself. And honestly, he's still pretty angry about it. That's why he decided to tell me all of this, because he wants people to understand how things really work behind the scenes. According to him, over the past 2 years, layoffs in his company followed one very simple rule. Age. 35 is a hard cutoff. For some positions, it's 32. In more extreme cases, even 28. Now here's the problem. A lot of these employees have been with the company for years. If you lay them off directly, you're legally required to pay compensation, what's commonly called N+1, and sometimes even 2N. Let me quickly explain what N+1 means, because this is important. In China's labor system, N refers to the number of years you've worked at the company. For each year, you're entitled to 1 month of your average salary over the past 12 months. The +1 is an extra month of salary on top of that. So if you've worked somewhere for 10 years, N+1 means 11 months of pay as compensation. And if your salary is high, that becomes a very large number. That's why companies try so hard to avoid paying it. So when the cost of laying someone off directly gets too high, companies don't just accept it, they start getting creative. One day, Xiaowei's boss called a private meeting, and what he revealed sounded almost unbelievable. He said they had just reached an agreement with several other companies, some in the same industry, some not, to form something they called a layoff alliance. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. And this alliance only does 2 things. The first is poaching, but not in the normal sense. Inside this alliance, companies actively poach employees from each other, specifically targeting those who are expensive to fire. Here's how it works. First, inside the company, they start applying pressure to a specific employee. Not openly, not aggressively, but gradually. They isolate you, exclude you from things, make your work environment uncomfortable. It's not enough to get them into legal trouble, but it's enough to wear you down mentally. Then, another company from the alliance steps in. They offer you a higher salary, a better title, and a promising future. And because these are well-known companies, you trust them. Most people would. So you take the offer. And that's when the trap is already set. Because after you leave, one of 2 things happens. Either the company suddenly cancels the offer before you even start, or you join, work there for about a month, and then you're laid off. Xiaowei told me this method is extremely effective. But what's even more shocking is that this system is organized. It's not random at all. They actually keep records, like a ledger. For example, if company A helps company B take an employee, that employee might join company A and get laid off after 1 month. But during that 1 month, the salary and social insurance are actually paid by company B. They even use third-party firms to handle the transactions, so everything looks clean on the surface. This isn't a trick. It's a fully developed system. The second function of this layoff alliance is more subtle. It's used for employees who are not urgent to fire, but are not considered long-term either. For these people, the company doesn't immediately pressure them. Instead, other companies in the alliance will keep trying to poach them. And the moment you send out your resume or go to an interview, you're already stepping into a dangerous situation. Technically, interviewing while employed is not illegal. But if your interview affects your work, the company can hold you accountable. And here's where things get interesting. Normally, your boss might not pay much attention to you. But the moment you go to an interview, suddenly you're assigned an urgent task. Something that has to be done immediately, something only you can handle. If you fail to deliver, it creates a perfect reason to question your performance. And honestly, at that point, it's probably not a coincidence. Once the company knows you're looking for another job, everything changes. You start getting sidelined, excluded, marginalized. And from there, your eventual exit becomes justified. But it gets worse. If during an interview you're somehow guided into revealing sensitive information, maybe without even realizing it, you could be in serious trouble. Xiao told me he personally handled multiple cases where employees violated non-compete agreements or disclosed internal data during interviews. These people were immediately terminated. No compensation. Nothing. He even said that if the company doesn't go after you for additional damages, that's already considered lenient. Now, all of these tactics work well for employees who are relatively easy to push out. But what about those who aren't? People who are older, who no longer care about promotions, who just want stability and plan to stay until retirement. Those are much harder to deal with. But companies still have ways. Xiao told me about a case he personally handled. There was a director in the operations department who had been with the company for nearly 20 years. If they laid him off directly, the compensation would have been around 470,000 renminbi. So instead, they promoted him. They moved him into a regional role and gave him the title of general manager for a subdivision. On paper, it looked like a big step up, but the salary structure was carefully redesigned. The base salary was very low. Most of the income depended on performance. And the performance targets were entirely based on growth, new business, new results. On top of that, they offered him something very attractive. An equity deal. If he met the growth targets within a year, he would receive company shares. If not, he would get nothing. But in reality, the targets were almost impossible to achieve. 1 year later, as expected, he failed to meet the goals. The company then initiated termination. This time, his N+1 compensation was only 104,000 renminbi. Originally, it would have been 470,000. After 1 year, it dropped to 104,000. Xiao calculated that during that extra year, including salary, social insurance, and the final compensation, the company spent about 248,000 renminbi in total. That's almost half of what they would have paid if they had laid him off directly. So why did the compensation drop so much? Because N is calculated based on the average salary over the previous 12 months. And during that year, his salary had already been reduced significantly. Lower salary means lower compensation. According to Xiao, this is not a special case. This is a common strategy for dealing with long-term employees. First, reduce their salary. Then keep them for a while. Then lay them off. Save money wherever possible. And from the company's perspective, it still makes sense. Because during that time, the employee is still working. The job is still getting done. Someone has to do it anyway. A lot of people used to think that big companies wouldn't go this far. That things like fake poaching or coordinated layoffs sound too complicated to be real. But now it's clear. As long as your potential compensation cost exceeds a certain threshold, you become worth that level of effort. And that so-called layoff alliance? It includes companies you've definitely heard of. The kind you never thought would operate like this. I am Lino. I have to cover my face and use an AI voice because I often cannot help but express views that the authorities dislike. And I live in a country where even accessing YouTube is banned. If you want to understand the China you don't see, subscribe. See you in the next video.